a forest that moved, trees that whispered, shadows that seemed to stretch across the Roman ranks. And then Rome marched in, 20,000 soldiers, 3 legions, shields gleaming, standards held high. They were walking into a trap. It wasn't a battle yet. It was annihilation waiting in the darkness. For centuries, Rome had conquered lands, toppled kings, and built an empire stretching from the sands of Egypt to the cliffs of Hispania. But here, in the dense, uncharted forests of Germania, the empire would falter. The orders were clear. Augustus envisioned Germania as the next jewel of Rome. Roads, forts, taxes, and administration would transform the untamed lands into another province. He sent Publius Quinctilius Varus, a seasoned general, to enforce this vision. Varus was confident, disciplined, and loyal to Rome's glory, believing the tribes could be integrated, the land tamed, and Roman law imposed. But the tribes of Germania had no intention of submission. Arminius, a noble of the Cherusci, had grown up in Rome, trained as a Roman ally and understood Roman discipline. He had gained the trust of Varus himself. Yet beneath the mask of loyalty, he plotted. Germania would not bow. It would strike, and it would strike through Rome's own hand. Rome underestimated the forest. Paths twisted like serpents, rivers cut across marching lines, and the soil turned to mud with every rain. Legions marched in formation, their standards proud, their voices echoing commands, but the terrain stripped them of their advantage. Heavy armour became a liability. Supplies slowed. Scouts could not penetrate the thick canopy. Every step forward was a step deeper into danger. Varus believed the forest was simply a path to conquest. He did not see the whispers among the tribes, the hidden warriors gathering silently, or the subtle misdirections guiding him into the trap roads laid by Roman engineers betrayed him, carefully designed by Arminius to lead the legions into the Saltus Narrows, a choke point where the forest would do what no army could, turn order into chaos. Rome's illusion of control began to crack. Forts and garrisons meant little here. The forest demanded more than discipline. It demanded cunning, knowledge, and respect. Qualities the Romans lacked in this land. Varus's soldiers, confident and trained, were slowly stripped of certainty. Every rustle, every bird startled into flight, every sudden bend in the path fed the growing tension. And so, the expansion of Rome marched forward, blind to the storm ahead. 3 legions, disciplined and proud, stepped into the Teutoburg Forest roads, and maps promised safety. Betrayal and terrain promised death. This was the beginning. The empire's might, its pride, and its belief in inevitability would collide with the untamed fury of Germania. By the time the first arrows flew, by the time the first ambush struck, the fate of 3 legions and the terror that would haunt Rome for decades was already sealed. The Roman legions moved forward. Step by step, the forest closed in. Mud clung to their sandals. Rain fell in sheets. Every branch overhead seemed alive, swaying like it had a mind of its own. The pride of Rome, the 17th, 18th, and 19th legions, was marching straight into a nightmare. Varus rode at the front, confident that order and discipline could tame even the wildest lands. His soldiers sang faint chants to keep spirits up, drums and horns marking the rhythm of the march. But beneath the canopy, shadow shifted. Germania's warriors were waiting. Arminius had prepared every path, every turn, every trap. The forest was no longer just a backdrop. It was a weapon. Narrow paths forced columns to stretch. Formations became vulnerable, and supplies lagged behind. The legion's heavy armour sank into mud, shields clanged awkwardly, and the carefully drilled manoeuvres faltered. What had been a march of conquest became a crawl through a living labyrinth. Scouts returned with warnings. The path narrows, movement slows, strange signals ahead. Varus waved them off. Confidence, arrogance, and trust in Rome's invincibility blinded him. He saw the forest as a challenge, not a predator. the tribes of Germania watched silently. Warriors hidden behind trees in ravines and along ridges waited for the precise moment. Arminius, smiling beneath his Roman training, knew the terrain better than anyone. Every bend in the road, every bend in the river, had been planned to funnel the legions into the kill zones, the saltest narrows where chaos would reign. Hours turned to days. Exhaustion crept into every soldier's bones. Mud and rain weighed down men and animals alike. The forest seemed endless. Anxiety replaced confidence. Whispers spread among the ranks. Were they being followed? Were eyes watching from the shadows? Varus maintained his composure, but the first seeds of doubt were planted. By the time the sun fell behind the thick canopy, Rome's march had lost its rhythm. Discipline strained under the weight of nature itself, and somewhere ahead, invisible, Arminius's warriors waited, coiled like serpents ready to strike. The first ambush was near, and the Empire would soon discover that not all terrain could be conquered by steel and order. The forest had already claimed the first hints of Roman order. Twisting paths, fallen trees, and thick undergrowth turned a disciplined army into a stumbling, vulnerable mass. Varus had no idea that the whispers of his trusted ally, Arminius, were a lie. Germania's so-called ally had spent years inside Rome's own schools, learning their tactics, understanding their fears, and now, with intimate knowledge, he was about to strike. The morning of the trap broke grey, the sky heavy with rain. Mud clung to boots, armour weighed soldiers down, and the air was thick with the scent of wet leaves and iron. The 3 legions, 17, 18, and 19, marched in a long, snaking line, confident yet blind to the disaster closing in. Arminius's coalition of Germanic tribes had been shadowing them for days, feigning distance, letting the Romans feel safe. And then it began. The first attack was almost invisible, a hail of javelins from unseen positions. The Romans froze, trying to form lines to fight an enemy they could not see. Every movement was slowed by the forest, every order delayed by noise and confusion. Trees, once allies in shelter, now became traps. Branches broke under weight, hiding pits and spikes the Germans had prepared, and the dense foliage masked every sudden strike. Varus tried to rally his men, shouting through the chaos, but the forest swallowed his voice. Panic rippled through the ranks. The soldiers, trained to advance in open fields, found themselves crushed against fallen trees, mud-slick slopes, and an enemy they could not engage properly. The Roman discipline, their pride, began to unravel. Day turned into a nightmare of relentless attacks. The Germans emerged from the shadows, striking swiftly and retreating before the Romans could counter. Spears rained down from every side. Battering ram-like charges funneled into narrow clearings where legions could not maneuver. It was not a battle, it was a slow, agonizing extermination. Varus himself rode at the front, attempting to maintain order, to guide his men through the trap, but the forest, Arminius, and misjudgment had conspired against him. Every path forward led to another ambush, another massacre. The Romans were trapped in a deadly spiral. The more they tried to fight, the more they exposed themselves. By the 3rd day, exhaustion set in. Hunger, mud, rain, and terror had ground down even the stronger soldiers. Survivors clung to each other in broken formations, trying to regroup, but there was no regrouping. Every attempt met with coordinated Germanic strikes. Arminius watched his former Roman comrades collapse under the very discipline he had studied and exploited. The final blow came when the Romans were forced into a ravine, a narrow channel from which there was no escape. Spears, axes, and arrows struck from every angle. The 17th, 18th, and 19th legions, the pride of Rome's northern frontier, were obliterated. Aquili fell, the standards seized, and the legacy of centuries of conquest vanished in hours of terror. Varus, seeing the annihilation of his legions, chose his own fate. Historical accounts tell us he plunged his sword into himself a desperate act to avoid capture and humiliation. The forest had swallowed the empire's finest, and Arminius had delivered Rome one of its most humiliating defeats. The Teutoburg trap was more than a military disaster. It was a psychological one. Rome had learned in the most brutal way that terrain, cunning, and betrayal could undo the mightiest legions. Augustus himself was said to have walked his palace in despair, repeating, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." The aftermath of this ambush would echo through centuries, a lesson in strategy, overconfidence, and the deadly cost of underestimating an enemy who knew your mind as well as you knew your own. Silence fell over Rome, though the city never slept. Word travelled slowly at first, whispers growing into disbelief, then horror. 3 entire legions, 17, 18, 19, had vanished into the forests of Germania. 20,000 men, the pride of the empire, gone. No survivors, no triumph. Only a forest that had swallowed Rome's ambition. Augustus, emperor of a world-spanning empire, was said to be shattered. He walked the halls of the Palatine Palace, haunted by the chant of Varus's name, "Quintili Vare, legiones redi." The Senate froze in panic. Blame and fear spread faster than any decree. Rome had never faced a disaster so total, so personal, so visible. The loss was not only human, but symbolic. The eagles, the sacred aquilae of the destroyed legions, were captured by Arminius. To lose a standard was to lose honour, prestige, and the aura of invincibility. Across the empire, commanders felt vulnerability for the first time. Rome's northern frontier was no longer secure. Germania remained free. In the weeks that followed, Augustus ordered measured responses. Legions rebuilt, fortifications reinforced, supply lines re-evaluated. Yet there would be no immediate attempt to conquer the forested lands beyond the Rhine strategy. Without understanding terrain, alliances and deception had failed. Rome had been humbled. Arminius, trained in Roman ways yet now a master of betrayal, became a hero among the Germanic tribes. His victory united them. Creating a coalition that resisted Rome for decades, Germania Magna would remain unconquered. Rome's northern ambitions had stalled permanently. For historians, the Teutoburg disaster was more than a tactical defeat. It was a turning point. The psychological scars lasted longer than any battlefield wound. Intelligence could be weaponized. Terrain could be an ally, and pride could blind even the mightiest. The forest that swallowed Rome did not vanish. For centuries it lingered as a shadow in history, the ground whispering of ambition crushed beneath mud and trees. Generations would remember Varus and Arminius. But the true legacy was etched in the land itself. Calcrease, the fields where Roman eagles fell and shields lay broken, would eventually speak to the modern world. Archaeologists uncovered bones, weapons, and fragments of a civilization that once believed itself invincible. Each artifact told a story, the pride of an empire, the cunning of a betrayed ally, and the unforgiving hand of nature. The forest had done more than destroy an army. It had reshaped Rome's ambitions, forced the empire to rethink its borders, and left Germania free for centuries. The ambush became legend, a stark reminder that even the mightiest can be undone by hubris, deceit, and the land they underestimated. By the time the dust settled, Rome had survived, but it was forever changed. The Rhine became the northern boundary, a testament to restraint forced by catastrophe. The memory of the lost legions haunted Rome, and the forest itself became a silent monument to one of history's most devastating ambushes. The story of Teutoburg is not merely about defeat. It is about the fragility of power, the consequences of trust betrayed, and the thin line between domination and annihilation. Courage, hubris, and nature collided in a single, terrible moment, leaving a lesson written in blood, mud, and shadowed trees, a lesson Rome would never forget.